Look at her from above. The harbour walls, the lighthouse, the ring of the theatre, the long backs of the warehouses, the forest of roofs and chimneys. This is Ostia, harbour of Rome. Ships bring grain, oil and wine from every corner of the sea. But my story doesn't begin here. It begins far away among dark trees and cold rain. My children were born free. I was not. We're sitting now in the cool of the evening in a small courtyard in Ostia. Vines climb the wall, a fig tree throws long shadows, and the smell of bread rises from the bakery below our rooms. My son is drawing in the dust with a stick. My daughter is plaiting a garland from basil and wildflowers. They know I work at the grain warehouses. They know I can read a little and count the sacks as they arrive from distant harbours. They do not know how I first came here. Long before this courtyard, I belonged to the forests far to the north, where the winters were long and the rivers ran dark and cold. I remember the night they came. We heard the shouting first, then the fire, men in metal armour, faces hidden behind helmets, driving us together like cattle. I saw my father fall. I remember my mother's voice calling my name until it vanished in the smoke. We were roped into a line, boys, men, a few women, all stumbling through the trees. The ground froze beneath our bare feet. The Romans said nothing. Only the clink of armour and the snap of branches answered our cries. Days later, we reached the sea. I had never seen so much water. The ships waited in the harbour, dark-bellied, creaking against the waves. They pushed us below deck into the stink of fear and sweat and vomit. The world became the roll of the ship, the groan of wood, the taste of salt on cracked lips. Some prayed in our old tongue. Some were too tired even for that. I do not know how long the crossing took. Time is different in chains. One morning the darkness changed. We were herded up onto the deck, blinking in a hard, bright light. Ahead of us stood a city, high walls, long rows of buildings, smoke lifting from chimneys, and beyond, a great river swollen with ships. Warehouses lined the water like teeth. At the mouth of the harbour, a tall white lighthouse burned day and night, its fire calling ships safely home. This was Ostia, the harbour of Rome. They drove us down the gangplanks, across the busy quays. Dockworkers shouted, cartwheels rattled over stone, cranes creaked as amphorae and grain sacks swung through the air. The air smelled of fish, pitch, sweat, and something sweet from a nearby bakery. We did not go to the bakery. They marched us to a washing place by the water, long stone troughs, cold river water splashing over our heads. Men with buckets and brushes scraped the voyage from our skin. Some laughed, some swore at us, some did their work in silence. Our hair was cut, beards shaved, dirt and memory washed away. Cleaned like pottery, we were ready to be sold. The slave market stood near the heart of the city, close to the forum. That was the first time I saw how magnificent Ostia truly was. High colonnades surrounded a wide square. Vendors called out their wares, figs, olives, oil. A money changer ran his fingers through piles of coins. In the distance, I could see the arches of the theatre, and beyond them, the tiled roofs of insulae rising in tight rows, stacked with families like dovecotes. We were lined up on a wooden platform. Buyers moved along the row, prodding arms, checking teeth, speaking to the traders as though we were mules. When it was my turn, they made me turn, flex, walk. One man tapped my chest with a knuckle and nodded. He was a grain merchant. He bought me and 3 others and led us away like a small flock. That is how my life as a slave of Ostia began. The warehouses, Aurea, were vast. Inside, the air shimmered with dust. Grain rose in tall heaps like pale, dry hills. We carried sacks from carts to storerooms, from storerooms to river barges, from barges back again. When I closed my eyes at night, I could still feel the weight across my shoulders. We slept in a low room with mats on the floor, shoulder to shoulder. At dawn we queued for food at a street stall, thick barley porridge, a crust of bread, sometimes olives if we were lucky. We learned the city in small glimpses. On our way to the latrines, long stone benches shared by strangers, we passed taverns echoing with laughter and argument. On the way back from the docks, the warm steam of cheap bathhouses drifted out into the street. Sometimes, carrying amphorae past the theatre, I heard the roar of the crowd and caught a slice of painted scenery through the entrance, a god on a painted horse, an actor in a tragic mask. Slaves could attend the theatre if our masters allowed it. Mostly, they did not. Yet even in chains, life found cracks to grow through. There was a woman among the warehouse slaves from the eastern provinces with quick hands and a quicker smile. We were permitted to share a small corner of the sleeping room. No priest blessed us, no contract sealed our union, only whispered vows and a shared loaf stolen from the bakery where we sometimes delivered grain. For a short time, I knew happiness. Fever took her in one hot summer. We buried her beyond the city walls with others who owned nothing but their names. I was given no extra day to mourn. The next morning, the sacks still needed carrying. Years passed. I grew broader in the shoulders, slower to anger, quicker to think. My master discovered I could remember numbers. Soon I was counting sacks instead of only lifting them, noting which ship brought what, watching for theft. When thieves tried to cut open a grain bag and sew it up again, I was the one who noticed. When a section of roof leaked and spoiled a store, I was the one who found it. Trust, like freedom, is earned little by little. One day my master called me into a small office. The air smelled of wax and ink. A clerk stood ready with stylus and tablets. They spoke of my years of service, of the profits I had helped protect. Then, in front of witnesses, my master pronounced the words that changed everything. I was no longer his property. I was a freedman. I took his family name as my own. My body was scarred, my back still bowed from labor, but for the first time since that night in the forest, I belonged to myself. Life did not become easy, but it became mine. I rented a small room in an insula, high under the roof. In winter, the wind found every crack. In summer, the heat was like a hand on the back of your neck. But it was my key that turned the lock. I still worked with grain, now as a paid overseer. I could choose on rare free days to visit the public baths with other freedmen, stepping from cold to warm to hot rooms, feeling the weight of years loosen in the steam. I met my second wife at a tavern near the Forum, a woman from Gaul, strong in the arms and clear in the eyes, who laughed at my halting Latin and then helped me speak it better. She too had once been a slave. She too had bought her own clothes with her own coins. Together we vowed our children would never know the taste of chains. We made offerings at the temples, small coins, a handful of flowers, a pinch of incense on the altar flame. We watched plays at the theatre from the cheaper seats, sharing a loaf and cup of watered wine. We ate hot stew at the counter of the Thermopolium, its marble surface warm beneath our hands, while outside the streets thrummed with carts and voices and the creak of cranes at the harbour. In time, our children came, Roman-born, free. Now, some evenings, when my bones ache and the sun sinks low over the warehouses, I walk the road beyond the city walls, the one lined with tombs, stone houses for the dead, some grand, some simple. On one side lies the monument of my former master. I pause and nod my head. Without him, I would not have freedom or this life. Which brings me here, to this moment. My son's stick, tracing patterns in the dust. My daughter's garland of basil. The evening light catching the far-off lighthouse fire. My children, I say softly, this city was not built by emperors alone. It was built by hands like mine, by people who came in chains and people who were born free. Remember that. From the doorway, my wife's voice floats out. Come inside. Supper's ready. My son jumps up. My daughter places the garland gently on my shoulders. Together we rise and walk towards the warm glow of lamplight and the smell of soup and bread. Above us, on the rooftops of Ostia, the last birds settle. Down in the harbour, another ship ties up at the quay. And somewhere far to the north, in the deep forests of my childhood, the wind moves through the trees, carrying no chains, only the sound of leaves.